Sometime later, the city prison crawled into view. It was well outside of town and nestled at the bottom of a mountain. The walls were high, the towers were manned, and it certainly looked intimidating. Wanda shook her head. The auction wasn't in the prison, merely within sight of it. A flat stretch of grassy field had been rented out and set up like a little carnival. Well, if a carnival included things like flashy cars, firearms, and tight security. Wanda's ID, business ID, insurance, passport, and a few other things were inspected before she was allowed to enter the park. She was even given a little bid fan that read 229 and eventually found herself roaming the grounds. Hours went by and she sat in on a few smaller mile-a-minute auctions. She ended up with a couple of dozen items that most people simply weren't bidding on for bottom dollar. Her van started to fill up pretty quickly. A taxidermy animal here, a binder of baseball cards there. There was an interesting spread of things. Deciding to at least peek in on one of the bigger ticket item auctions, Wanda sat quietly down in an array of folding chairs. The high-top tent's flaps were pulled closed once seating was filled. And here we have it, ladies and gentlemen, an early European alchemist crucible. The auctioneer gestured to a stained porcelain bowl on a show table. 500 years old and still in working order. There was polite laughter as he reached with a latex glove and turned it over for everyone to see. Found in the collection of a minor art thief after he visited 37 museums all over France and England. Shall we start the bidding at $1,800? Porcelain, and nothing more. The man sat next to Wanda, folded his arms, and leaned back. She frowned at him, but lifted her bidding fan nonetheless. It's a piece of history. One man's trash, he shrugged, nodding towards the prison. I see 2,200, 3,000, 4,400. Wanda cursed as the auctioneer went way beyond her price range for a single item in a flash. Better luck next time, young lady. The man next to her chuckled a little. She rolled her eyes at him. Do you have any interest in alchemy and European lore, then? Yeah, Wanda said. Truth be told, her benefactor had more interest than she, but perhaps bringing him something like this would have helped things behind the scenes. But no, someone took the crucible home for almost $7,000. Doesn't alchemy straddle the line between magic and science? He asked her conversationally. I don't believe that. If you always get the same result, it's no different than cooking, Wanda said, standing as the auctioneer went on to another item. Right, I suppose so, said the man ponderously, touching his chin with a finger. But with villains like Dr. Galaxy running around in our fair city, I suppose magic isn't quite out of the question, is it? Wanda said, putting her back to him and leaving the tent. When she left, they allowed exactly one more person into the high-top tent behind her. Too high for my taste, she said to the curious security guard, who smiled and nodded. Meanwhile, inside the prison, no more than a mile away, a different sort of conversation was going on. A gentleman in rather formal attire was approaching the first visitor's checkpoint. A black suit with a red tie made him look crisp and intimidating. Papers, please. The guard at the checkpoint reached out to him as he approached on foot. 2 or 3 guards standing in a lookout tower watched with interest. Most visitors were family members, and this guy certainly didn't look like a relation of one of the guys in there. The man handed over a manila folder, which was flipped through and stamped accordingly. Interviewing inmates, huh? The guard said after scanning through the stack. Writing a book or something? Or something. The man smiled pleasantly, touching his finger to his tongue and delicately smoothing an eyebrow. There was a sheen to him, almost like grease, in his hair. Well, this is a high-security facility, sir, the guardsman said. They'll put you through a metal detector, check your stuff, and escort you everywhere you go. Be sure to do everything the staff tells you for your own safety. No wandering off. I wouldn't dream of it. The monsters in here can't be trusted, he said, looking up at the intimidating outer walls to his right. It looks like a castle, really. How many do you think live here? Well, our current population is somewhere around 1,300, and the capacity is 1,600. The man sounded just a little bit proud of that. Far too many, the man said, straightening his tie. So how did you get on our inmates' list of possible visitors? He handed back the pink sheet, giving him a bright orange visitor's pass to clip to his chest. Most of them can only name 5 family members and 10 non-family members. We exchanged letters for a very long time. I convinced him to allow me to visit so I could hear his side of things in person. Is that right? He buzzed a guard out of a waiting room and into the stone courtyard where they both stood. Well, he'll talk for hours if you let him. Not much to do in here. Inmates like the attention. Don't worry, I won't be here long. He smiled and greeted the woman that came out to escort him. Madam... You'll need to leave your cane here, sir, she said a little stiffly, not giving her name. Wouldn't want one of the inmates to grab it and try to brain somebody. Oh yes, forgive me. He hefted his black walking cane up to grasp the middle. The silvery head was dragon-shaped. He handed it over to the guard inside the checkpoint house. Take good care of that, he teased a little. It's an antique. Will do. The guard watched him limp forward a bit until the female guard took his arm to help him along. Good luck in there. The handsome man and his escort guard passed 2, 3, 4 levels of security. A metal detector, a pat-down, a drug dog, and so on. He was made to sign a few things and was given back his hip bag when it was thoroughly searched for anything out of the ordinary. So what made you pick this place? His escort wanted to know, guiding him along the cell blocks. You have a large array of prisoners all here for wildly different reasons. It's the only prison that I can find that has level 1 through level 5 prisoners under one roof in the tri-state area. He smiled pleasantly, looking down a hall of cells as they passed it. Level 1 prisoners tend to be in reintegration programs, allowing far more freedom of movement. The scale goes up to level 5 inmates, who are kept in solitary confinement 23 hours a day and allowed outside for exercise for 1 hour a day. Well, you've done your homework, I see. She nodded along with the basic facts. The man you're here to see? Victor Stonebrook? He's a 3, if I remember right. Troublemaker, but not impossible to control. They passed another couple of hallways. Prisoners dotted the passages, mopping floors, pushing laundry carts, and other busy work activities. The yard teemed with activity like basketball and weight benches. Gray with more gray with more gray. Every prisoner was dressed in eye-catching neon orange. Well, this is as far as I go. No staff with firearms are allowed among the prisoners. She gestured to yet another checkpoint with metal bars and a guard station. A good precaution to have, dear lady, he said pleasantly, leaning on the wall with one hand to favor his leg a little. And Victor Stonebrook is this way? Yes, I'll have them buzz you in. She walked quickly to the window of the guard station and firmly tapped on the glass. The guard looked up from his monitors and paperwork, nodding and lifting a hand to wave. Reaching over, he turned a key from his necklace and reached to press the button to allow him through, but stopped. His eyes widened and he turned as pale as a sheet. What is it, Stan? She felt the shadow growing over her too slowly before a massive haymaker sent her flying to one side, out the reinforced glass window and tumbling across the grass. Shards sent a spray of blood in all directions. We have a break-in! Break-in! Hit the alarm! Stan threw himself out of his rolling chair and rushed to break the glass over the lockdown button. He heard the sound of more broken glass behind him as the visitor forced his way through. Then the entire checkpoint was engulfed in flames. Stan was flung bodily back into his chair and died there. The visitor emerged from the smoke, eyes glowing an otherworldly orange. His suit and tie morphed and clanked over his splendid form until it became plated armor. His skin became leathery and red. Tearing sounds could be heard as his shirt exploded out the back, and massive bat-like wings began to emerge. The fire alarm kicked in and doused the entire hallway, screaming a foggy steam into the air. His face lengthened and hardened while long black horns began to emerge above his ears. A tail split his pants. He reached to one side and, out of thin air, the dragon-headed cane appeared before it morphed into a horrific, curved sword. "Don't get up on my account, Stan. Lord Dragon prefers his allies to keep their seats." His smooth voice had turned deep and guttural, spraying hot steam into the air and displaying a forked tongue. Reaching through the broken window frame of the guard post, he jammed the button with an enormous clawed thumb. Letting himself in, he checked briefly on Stan's charred remains. Now was no time for a snack. There were monsters to slay. Leaning and rather comically setting his watch, the band had expanded to fit his thick wrist, he set it to 15 minutes. In and out before anyone could do anything about what was happening. "Now, allow me to make your job a little easier." He charged forward on taloned feet like a raptor. He splashed past the area where the sprinklers were dousing the fire he started. Rounding a corner, he found himself in a 3-story cell block. Smiling at the simplicity of it all, he took a deep breath and roared into the empty space. Prisoners were on their feet and to their cell doors in seconds, peering fearfully out at him, like lambs to the slaughter. Lord Dragon checked the signage with a flick of his glowing eyes. Level 4s. Troublemakers that have to be closely watched and monitored. He licked his chops for a moment. Taking a deep breath, he sprayed fire from his maw and in a great arc around the room. Over a dozen cells ignited, killing the inmates inside. Then the screaming started. Lifting his horrific blade high, he cut his way into another cell, seized the inmate, and flung him 2 stories up to smash against the 3rd-floor catwalks. Lighting the bed ablaze, he pulled it from its bolts on the floor and hurled it across the hall. Spotting a security camera, he knocked it down with a toilet that he'd wrenched off of its setting. The longer he could keep them in the dark, the better. As far as they knew, it was a gas leak at the guard station checkpoint, and the fire was spreading fast. Lord Dragon turned with a smile, displaying all of his crisscrossed fangs. Pumping his wings twice, he arrived on the 3rd floor and pulled a cell door from its hinges. He seized the man inside and dropped him over the edge. He fell 2 stories to a concrete death. "Let us out! Someone help us!" they cried, rattling the bars of their cells. "El Diablo es aquí!" Someone else screamed in horror, pointing. Lord Dragon favored him with a laugh before sending another spray of fire across a handful of cells. The men inside had no chance. Breaking the handrail and wrenching the walkway off the wall, he threw it down 2 floors and watched it shatter, sending shrapnel everywhere. Pulling another man from his cell and holding him by his prison garb, he simply tore out his throat with his teeth and tossed the corpse to spray gore on the wall. Another blast of fire, then another, and then another. Soon the entire cell block was going up in flames. Lord Dragon walked from the inferno when the last survivor succumbed, his armor smoldering with heat and sword in hand. Cutting down a barrier, he traveled to another cell block. Ah, the 5s. He marveled at the giant red Level 5 painted clinically on the wall. The worst monsters of the lot. The heavy metal doors that kept the place sealed were no match, and he kicked them in with 3 monstrous blows. A standing guard whipped around with a shout before the draconic man smashed his head against the wall to knock him out. 1 prisoner per cell. He went up the hallway and then back down it at a brisk pace. Serial killers, multi-count pedophiles, violent murderer rapists. Their sins were on little clipboards and slots attached to their doors. All the easier. Pulling open the food slot in the first door made for an easy handle. The man inside gasped in horror when a large black-clawed hand reached inside, grasped the metal, and tore it from its hinges. He only had time to stand before Lord Dragon split him in half with his sword from skull to penis. The spray of gore was spectacular. Just then, a group of armed guards rounded the corner when he emerged into the hallway again. "It's a meta creature! Open fire!" the front guard shouted. The front row knelt and they formed up like a squad of archers. Lord Dragon lifted his forearm to cover his face as he was spattered with bullets. Their weapons screamed and the hailstorm of bullets filled the hallway. His plated armor protected him with a rare exception of scraping or bruising on his exposed wrists and feet. "Control room, this is Red Leader. We have a meta creature in cell block 5. Repeat, meta creature in cell block... Ah! Lord Dragon didn't have time to waste with these children, pumping his wings 3 times and diving at the group with a roar. A good thrashing was all they needed to see things his way. Throwing someone against a concrete wall hard enough was usually enough to put them out of the fight, though he did enjoy grabbing people by the throat. Controlling his urges to bite off a head here and there, he put the entire group down before they could escape him. He checked his watch. 9 minutes remaining. Hefting his sword to his shoulder, he picked up the pace a bit. He broke into each of the 22 individual level 5 cells, killed their occupants, and moved on quickly. The prison was composed like a rectangle-shaped castle, with a central area yard to keep every prisoner that was outside in one area. He could see where he needed to go across the way. If gunfire was already upon him, the time for subtlety was over. Emerging from cell block 5 and spraying a hallway window with fire, he shattered it and launched himself out to fly. A shout sent the entire yard into a panic of pointing and running. Flying low and laboring under the weight of his armor, Lord Dragon dashed the fences and ground with a curve of flame and unholy heat. Men flung themselves out of the way, but not all of them were so lucky. A column of smoke was already rising into the sky, thick and black. More guards emerged, toting shotguns and shouting orders both to prisoners and each other. He didn't bother with them and instead went feet first into a wall-sized window. The explosion of glass sent everyone in the room sprawling in fear and confusion. It was an entertainment room with board games and bookshelves for well-behaved prisoners. The level 3s, 2s, and 1s. Victor Stonebrook was here somewhere, no doubt. A cooperating monster was still a monster. All the prisoners were against the wall, curled up with their arms over their heads while 3 guards with shotguns watched over them. No doubt by now the prison was going into lockdown. All 3 guards recovered and blasted him wildly. Sparks and buckshot spattered his armor and face and legs, stopping him only briefly. They ran out of ammo in their panic. Seizing each in turn, he threw them over his shoulder and out into the yard area. One landed in the fires and screamed, throwing himself around to put the flames out on the ground. "Where is Victor Stonebrook?" Lord Dragon roared to the cowering line of orange-clad men. "Tell me now." A few fingers instantly lashed out at one man in particular. His eyes widened in genuine excitement. "At last." His heavy steps split the tiles he walked on, and he hefted the man upright by his neck. He struggled like a man being hanged, his legs kicking while he gagged. Victor Stonebrook, also called Vic the Killshot, also called the Inner City Sniper. Lord Dragon turned and slammed him into a standing bookshelf, sending books raining about his shoulders. Stunned for a moment, Victor could only gag and flail weakly. "That was 20 years ago. I've been in here since then. Life sentence." "A wasted life, unlike all the others you ended." Lord Dragon pulled him away and then slammed him against the shelves again. He yapped like a kicked dog. One shelf broke and jabbed his back with broken wood. The doggish sound made the villain smile. "But I'm not here about the ones you killed. I'm here about the one time you missed." Victor stared at him in horror. The one time he'd missed, he'd been over a mile away from his target. The bullet had a delay time of less than 3 seconds, and a little girl in a Sunday dress had stepped into the way at the last possible moment. The media firestorm that followed had gotten him caught and jailed forever. "You, her dad?" he gagged, trying to pull the huge fingers off his windpipe. They only tightened. "Childhood friend? What? I'm already in jail forever. Please." "You don't deserve jail, Victor." Lord Dragon's crisscross teeth snapped at his face, making the man shriek in terror. "You don't deserve the air you breathe." A yellow warmth went down his prison guard. The attacker's long, forked tongue worked up Victor's jaw, past his temples into his brow. His sweat and fear was palpable. Lord Dragon's glowing orange eyes flicked to his watch suddenly. Less than 5 minutes. "I would love to savor you in particular among all these monsters, but I've no time. I have 2 or 3 more cell blocks to burn in less than 5 minutes before any help arrives from the city. Wouldn't want to kill any law enforcement, coming here to kill you." Hefting his sword, he pinned Victor to the wall with one arm and made to run him through the stomach. "Stop!" A voice made him turn. More guards already? Lord Dragon gaped at what he saw. A young black woman in a purple leotard and mask, toting a golden shield in one arm. "Put him down!" she shouted over the crackle of flames behind her in the yard. "Now!" "Gladly." Lord Dragon smiled with all his fangs, turning and launching Victor out the window into the chaos outside. He screamed the entire way, and the crunch of bone could be heard when he struck a concrete wall. Then he fell into the inferno. The woman standing in the doorway looked horrified, and then rounded on Lord Dragon with clenched teeth. "Let me guess. Defender lady? Shield woman?" "Shield maiden," she said, limbering up one of her arms and clutching the straps of her shield in preparations. "Pfft, not according to your scent, you're not." Lord Dragon lifted his sword with a wry smile. "Who are you supposed to be? Trogdor?" she shot back, fighting the blush in her cheeks. "Lord Dragon, actually," he said with a frown, spreading his wings out. "Get out of the way, child. I have no time for you. I have more killers to kill before my time expires." He comically tap-tapped his watch like he was on a schedule. "Killing a killer doesn't reduce the number of killers in the world," Shield Maiden said stubbornly, widening her stance and clenching a fist. "But if you kill hundreds, you surely make a dent." Lord Dragon charged without warning, lifting his massive serrated blade. Sword met shield with a crash and a spray of sparks. She deflected him, stepping into his defenses, and spun about with an elbow to the nose. He grunted, stepping back twice. "That should have cut through your shield and arm." He pondered at her, genuinely surprised. "It's more than metal. Don't worry about it too much." Shield Maiden crashed into him headlong, jabbing his chest a few times in the exchange. She shook her sore hand. That was pretty heavy armor. His sword sang over her head, and she jumped into a spectacular uppercut to the chin, launching the massive creature off his feet and into the destroyed bookshelf behind him. He recovered with a snarl, inhaling deeply. Shield Maiden knelt and shrieked aloud when fire blasted through the room. Her shield split the beam of hellfire in half, sending twin deathly fires in 2 directions behind her. The shield glowed hot, but it would not melt or bend. When he ran out of breath, she charged him with a shout. He inhaled again, and she wildly seized his face, steering it upward. The ceiling ignited in his fury, raining debris in all directions. The prisoners ran when the opportunity came, shouting and screaming for help as the sprinklers finally went off and doused the room. Standing in the hot fog, Shield Maiden switched arms with her shield. Steam rose from its golden surface. She turned this way and that. He was easy to spot with his glowing orange eyes. "Why defend these monsters? They deserve to be punished." "They're being punished if you didn't notice where you are," Shield Maiden insisted, scrubbing her mouth with the back of her wrist. They met in the fog, shield and sword smashing against each other again and again. Wild flashes of light and fire showed their silhouettes to any onlookers. He finally got a hold of her neck and lifted her high in his draconic grip. She gagged, flailing and kicking. Running to the wall, he smashed her against it, piercing the stone and drywall, dragging her through it. Piping and wiring and innards fell out in an avalanche before he threw her across the room to destroy the librarian's desk in the impact. She staggered to her feet, spitting blood. Ah, yes, $300 billion a year in this country alone to keep these monsters locked up, fed, and orderly. What's the price of a 9mm bullet? Less than $1? That's not how it works. That's not how it works here or anywhere else, Shield Maiden said in disgust. Pity. They rushed to meet each other again, and she spun about his thrusting sword, letting it pass over her shoulder. Spinning like an ice skater, she smacked his face with her shield, somersaulting forward, and then brought it down with all her might. The metal rang like a gong. A ring of dust rushed away from Lord Dragon's ankles, and he was driven to one knee. He roared in pain and staggered, using his sword point to stay upright. She pressed her advantage, but he grabbed her by the face, lifted her high, and slammed her square on her back. The tiles shattered like a spider's web. She lay there for a few long moments, stunned and seeing white. When she blinked her vision back, he was leaning over her very closely. Suppose I throw you into the general population. His breathing was labored, a long line of dragon spit going down between them and touching her cheek. She was revolted by his breath, squirming just a little, but her body wouldn't obey. It hurt too much. Without your little shield and mask, with all the guards running around like chickens right now. Some of those men haven't even seen a woman in years. How many times would they have to rape you before you started agreeing with me? Her sudden right hook was so spectacular it sent a few scales splintering off of his face. He fell with a shout, and she rolled to reclaim her shield. She pushed her hair out of her face, sweaty and hurting. He rose slowly, stumbled once, and then stood upright. These men did bad things, but you and I don't get to decide their punishment, she said slowly. Lecture, 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 he said with a shake of his head, lifting his sword and breathing hard. Come back when someone important to you is dead. He swung wildly, but his strength had waned. Shield Maiden danced around him while he destroyed furniture, slashed holes in walls, and exploded glass panes. During their deadly dance, his watch suddenly beeped. He paused, lowering his weapon. Shield Maiden stopped, a little dumbfounded. A dragon man with a wristwatch wasn't something she'd been expecting. Ah, blast, he panted, looking at the row of zeros on his watch. Out of time. Turning suddenly, he bolted outside. Shield Maiden dashed after him, out the shattered window walls he'd destroyed. By the time her boots touched the ground, though, he'd spread his wings and taken off into the sky. Laboring hard with his wounds and his heavy armor, he crested the curtain wall. He was getting away! A sudden shot echoed from the guard tower outside the prison, and Shield Maiden saw the splash of blood from one of his wings. Lord Dragon fell with a roar of pain, spiraling through the air before striking the ground and falling into a fire. The splash of air and earth put the inferno out, and she rushed over to him. Just as he was recovering, she leapt high and, using the edge of her shield, delivered a powerful, hammer-like blow to his temple. He went down with a belting cry, sword skittering away. He was unconscious and bleeding. Shield Maiden stood over Lord Dragon, panting. She wiped her mouth again, checking for blood. She looked up at the guard tower that had shot him down. The men up there were exchanging high fives and pumping their fists. Even from where she was, she could hear the shouting and cheering. She smiled despite herself, waving at them. They waved back, pointing and shouting in celebration. Shield Maiden looked down at Lord Dragon, only to find a normal-looking man in his place. She gave a start, but she saw the wristwatch on his arm. Oh, you could only hold that form for so long, she reasoned, or until you got knocked out. She heard the sirens getting closer and closer. Or you only wanted to be here until help arrived, she corrected again. Scrubbing her short hair with one hand, she knelt in the dirt next to him. His nightmarish sword had become a dragon-headed cane sticking out of the ground not far away. "Whew," she sighed, wiping her brow again. The courtyard filled with law enforcement, and they swarmed over her and the panicked inmates. Fire hoses started coming out, and general order was starting to return. The unconscious Lord Dragon was taken away in strong restraints, and Shield Maiden was helped to her feet by a helmeted SWAT team member. "Glad you were here, lady. Takes us about 15 minutes to gear out and get here from the city," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "I think he knew that," Shield Maiden said. "He was wearing a watch and everything. He tried to fly away just as you were arriving." "Really?" the SWAT member said with a frown. "He must have really done his homework to know something like that. When he wakes up in Metacreature Prison, we'll be sure to ask him all the questions to find out how he got this info." "This place is a mess. Will it stay open?" "I don't know. I'm just on SWAT. Watch the papers." He shook his head. "But I'll make sure they hear about how you stopped this guy trying to set the whole compound on fire, Miss, Shield Maiden," she said, throwing up her best smile and putting a fist on her hip. "Shield Maiden, I like it," he smiled. "I'm glad." "Well, we'll take it from here." He gave her a friendly salute and started away. She stopped him for a moment. "Which way is out? I can't fly. I just followed the noise on the way in." "Oh, he pointed, and then redecided, and then pointed again. Then he checked with his fellows and pointed a third time, so she went that way. The next day, Wanda was lying on the couch because she'd lifted a box too big for herself at the auction. No, she hadn't seen the fires or the explosions or anything. She'd left early with a full van, thank you very much. Jasmine and Aiko gave her command of the couch and the TV remote, and Darren brought her the cheap and greasy Chinese food box that she liked. She would be fine in a day or two, she promised. After an hour or so of fussing at her for lifting something she shouldn't and hurting herself, they let her rest. A newspaper lay on the coffee table, picked through for coupons by Jasmine and picked through for finance articles by Aiko. The cover story blared, "New superhero Shield Maiden stops villain Lord Dragon in prison fire throwdown." The subtitle read, "Inmate death toll climbs past 40% of prison's population." There was a huge picture, no doubt taken from a security camera, plastered across the page. It showed Shield Maiden tumbling through the air to land a blow on Lord Dragon while prisoners cowered in the background. 40% though, wow. Wanda sighed at the thought. Lord Dragon had killed something to the tune of 500 prisoners before she'd stopped him. She only wished she could have gotten there sooner. She felt lucky that she'd decided to wear her leotard under her auction clothes. If she hadn't been there to buy oddities at the police auction, he probably would have gotten away with his whole killing spree. But it was over now, and she could rest easy. After watching a few news reports on the incident when her friends weren't around, she picked a cheesy chick flick and rested her head. Sure, plenty might agree with Lord Dragon's draconian ways, but she wasn't about to. She was Shield Maiden. Based on what he'd said, he probably had some sad, storied past that made him take up magic, shape-shifting, and murderous rampages, but she really didn't care. He tried to kill people, did kill people, and she'd put a stop to him. That was that. She scrubbed at her face a little. She could almost still smell the bad breath and feel the line of spit on her cheek. She got up and washed her face in the bathroom. That rape comment hadn't been the best either. She suddenly got the horrible image of Lord Dragon throwing her over a table and mashing his draconic self into her. Shower. Definitely need a shower, Wanda told herself quickly, squashing the line of thought. "Want me to scrub your back?" Darren had been close enough to hear. He leaned around the doorframe with a boyish smile. "No!" Wanda shouted, slamming the door in his face. "Sorry," he murmured from the other side. His footsteps went away. Wanda cursed herself. She'd have to make it up to him later. Maybe a movie night. How many Godzilla movies did Jasmine own? Enough to fill a shelf with all the special editions and junk. Wanda knew she could use some cuddle time as soon as her back stopped throbbing. She could feel her own heartbeat in the middle of her back. Jeez. She would need to ask her benefactor about Lord Dragon. It didn't hurt to know your enemy, even if he was freshly locked up in Metacreature prison. Only magical criminals were kept there under much more than lock and key. She kicked herself for not taking his sword that turned into a cane, but she knew she probably didn't want to mess with anything very magical in her adventures as Shield Maiden. Alchemy, at least, was a science. The symbol on her shield meant zinc, the galvanizing element that sacrificed itself for the structural integrity of whatever it was alloyed with. It prevented rust. It was a little silly, but it was as good a symbol as any. As Wanda stood under the shower's spray and nursed the patchwork of bruises on her back, she slowly smiled. She'd have to save that paper as a memento. Now the whole city knew about her. That was pretty cool.